Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episodes of Back to Basics. You may have noticed I don't give the episode name verbally because I can never remember what episode we're on, so I'm just skipping that entirely. As usual, I am Pastor Don, and joining me, as usual, is our magnificent and wonderful co-host, Courtney.
Hello.
So, last week we had our prelude to the flood. We talked about Nephilim and all that craziness there. And today we're going to start getting into the flood proper. For those of you who are following along and playing the home game, we will be looking at Genesis chapter 6. We'll be looking at the second half, starting from verse 9 all the way out to the end. Biblical headings not really being a thing. Most of them have some kind of heading break here. The NRSVUE, which I'm using, says Noah pleases God, but probably could be any number of things for you. In any case, we're going to be starting from verse 9. Courtney, do you want to read it or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. I got no problem with that.
Alrighty. Take it away.
All right. These are the descendants of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw that the earth was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. Now I am going to destroy them along with the earth. Make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits. Its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark and finish it to a cubit above, and put the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For my part, I am going to bring a flood of waters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every kind into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds according to their kinds, and of the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind, 2 of every kind shall come in to you to keep them alive. Also take with you every kind of food that is eaten, and store it up, and it shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. There we go.
Right. So we've got
one of the classic Sunday school stories.
Classic Sunday school text. But as is usual for a classic Sunday school text, the text itself is a little Brothers Grimm, whereas the Sunday school is a little Disney.
Yeah.
So we got a bit going on here. We've got all the bit about Noah, a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. What do you make of that?
I just took it to be metaphorical, like that he followed God and like prayed a lot. And
okay.
Whatever like intense religion at that time consisted of.
Yeah, it's interesting that when we read this, we tend to apply kind of a modern moralistic understanding of what blameless and righteous means. I'll give you a little bit of epic foreshadowing, but if we jump ahead to Genesis in chapter 9, we get drunk Noah passed out buck naked in his tent. Like, this is not like that. Like your shall we say hyper conservative interpreters of the Bible might, if they thought very slightly, find these 2 images somewhat contradictory. So what do you think righteous and blameless in his generation means?
Well, the righteous part I don't find is difficult to reconcile because righteous doesn't strike me as a synonym for perfect, but blameless is a little odder. I could hem and haw about it, but I know you know the right answer. So
well, again, dealing with a text so ancient, the term right answer in and of itself is problematic.
Sure.
But I'm with my interpretive text here that I've mentioned before, How to Read the Bible by James Kugel, brings up an interesting interpretive approach that people have used for years. And it harkens back to Genesis chapter 6, verse 3, which I've got in front of me. I'll read. It says, Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, for they are flesh. Their days shall be 120 years. Now, it was from last week. We didn't talk too much about that then. But there's a distinction here that interpreters tend to make, because back then, the Lord says, my spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, unassumed, therefore, they'll live no longer than 120 years. Now, Noah clocks in at the end around 950.
So more like the previous generations.
Exactly. So when they talk about righteous and blameless, those are, the word choice himself is interpretation, even in the Hebrew, like not even counting the English, but word choice is itself interpretation of, something. So here, whatever quality it is that Noah has may be assumed to be a spiritual quality, some sort of through line back to Adam. This is why the begats that we talked about were so important, is because Noah still maintains that through line back to Adam. In fact, if you wanted to get uber scientific about it, you might even make the interpretive claim that being righteous and blameless and godlike, so as to still have the spirit of God abiding within you, is not too different from, say, the mutant X gene in the X-Men comics, except instead of, laser eyes or weird telepathy or turning into, a giant blue monkey on occasion, you wind up with, connectivity to God and extra long life. And so that
seems like a very specific and weird interpretation. Is it the only one, or is it just one?
That is one of the more prominent ones, actually. Now, I've taken that to a more extreme degree by making it genetic and things like that. But the general idea here is that Noah wasn't...
So it's the accepted idea, and you're just being playful with it.
Have you met me?
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, but I'm just kind of weirdly shocked that that's the accepted idea.
The general interpretation is that Noah was the last one who still had, or allowed, depending on which way we want to look at it, the spirit of God to remain within it. And that's why Noah was picked, and it's also why he was still living, several centuries as opposed to everything else, which is awfully convenient because he had to basically become Neo-Adam and repopulate anyway.
Yeah, creating another genetic bottleneck, too.
There's a couple of those. And of course, modernly, we know that, 2,500 or something like that is the absolute minimum to maintain enough genetic diversity to propagate the species for humans.
Yeah.
So, one dude and his kids is not enough in order to make that work, given what we know of science.
I do wonder and kind of think that it probably is related to an actual historical population bottleneck, though. Again, we talked a little bit about how pretty much, I don't know about every, but a shocking number of countries.
Let me give you this. I'm going to actually quote here. This is my favorite little record scratch moment in early biblical history stuff. I'm going to quote here directly from How to Read the Bible by James Kugel here. And it says in a section entitled A Startling Discovery, it says, then late in the year 1872, the English Orientalist George Smith of the British Museum read a paper before the Society of Biblical Archaeology. The paper, The Chaldean Account of the Deluge, created an immediate sensation among his listeners and soon in the general public as well. In his paper, Smith reported on the discovery in the ruins of ancient Nineveh, now in Iraq, of a group of cuneiform tablets that contained a story very similar to the biblical account of the flood. Smith had access to only part of what was to later be known as the Epic of Gilgamesh, but soon other parts were published, and evidence of similar accounts of the flood also appeared in other ancient sources, a somewhat fragmentary Sumerian version, as well as a separate Babylonian and Assyrian text, the Atrahasis epic. Suddenly it became clear that the story of a great flood had been known all over ancient Mesopotamia and even beyond its borders. So that was
I mean, like early cultures in the Americas had like flood myths, like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Which I like ever since I was a kid, I was like, so that happened, right? Like
now
maybe not exactly like, you know, I take issue with the literalism possible here, but
yeah, I will raise.
Seem to have some sort of like human racial memory of this.
I agree. I totally agree. I will say that archaeologically speaking, Kugel says that as far as geologists can tell, no significant inundation has ever occurred in that area of the Mesopotamian. However, I would take issue with that because I am presuming, admittedly without entire evidence, that the geologists to whom Kugel refers here are looking at a very specific date range and not like way much farther back in time where such an oral history might be dating to.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, around about 4,000 to 8,000 BC, there probably wasn't any big floods in that region. But I'm betting this probably goes back quite a bit longer than that.
Yeah, I feel like 4,000 to 8,000 BC is going on a creationist time, like a literalist creationist time scale, which is obviously not right.
I'm not
it's demonstrably not right.
Yeah, I'm not super well versed in these literal specifics of biblical creationists here. I believe they think it's like 6,700 BC is creation or something like that. I think, but again, it's ridiculous.
I want to say they think that the Earth is about 10,000 years old or something like that.
Most of the ones I've heard put it between 6.4 and 6.7 BC. But I think I've seen a couple that put it closer to 7,000, but I don't think I've seen.
Well, then you slap on another couple thousand for AD, and that's getting you close, I guess.
I don't know. Again, we're not biblical creationists here. We don't believe that, it's a literal accounting that way. But, we do in fact see now, since the 1870s when these discoveries started popping off, that holy crap, there was definitely a thing going on here. Now, the interesting question, and this has been a big back and forth in the biblical community, is this a shared history or is this a shared literature? And I'll tell you right off the bat, Kugel doesn't give us a clear answer on that because he's an historian and not necessarily a biblical interpretationalist. But if you look at, like, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he gives a big chunk of the Epic of Gilgamesh right here in the book. It contains narrative and structural details to the story that are similar to Noah's account as well. So not just there was a flood and it happened, but like you have, in his case, it's, sending out a raven to check and it comes back. It's another raven to come back and then it brought back an olive branch. Yeah, so like there's story beats that appear in the same as well, which raises several different questions about whether this is a shared history or a shared literature. What do you think?
Well, inconclusive, honestly, because the fact that there's similar beats between stories, like this is something that people have used a lot to just be like, okay, well, the whole Bible isn't real. Because if you look at, the story of Jesus, you can look at, Egyptian stories and stories from other cultures in the area. And it's the same thing. It's the same set of beats. It's just you've inserted different characters and changed some details. To me, that strikes more, it could be that, but to me, it's always struck more as like you hear a story told, especially when something is passed along word of mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like, and I don't have degrees in this crap. I've got a liberal arts degree from community college that I am not an expert. This is my opinion, but this is what you have me here for, my goofy ass.
That's where we start, right?
I think that it's pretty easy to borrow storytelling elements for telling your own story from someone else's story. I think you see it a lot in like modern storytelling, and why would that just be a new invention, especially when it would have been a lot harder to trace along. That when a great storyteller in some culture heard this tale from another culture and was part of it really hit home, and it's like, that's a good way to get that idea across.
Exactly.
Maybe it got incorporated. And again, I want to couch this in, I know nothing effectively nothing about like, let me finish my sentence though, about like traditional Jewish word of mouth storytelling going back like millennia. No, obviously. It just, to me, doesn't seem like we have enough evidence to say one way or the other with that.
Well, don't sell yourself short there, because your average a-religious historian uses this as proof that the Bible and other texts basically just swiped a story they thought was cool and put it in for some sort of moralistic purpose.
Well, there's definitely swiping going on, but I think it could be storytelling devices rather than...
Exactly. Your approach makes way more sense given what we know of, Old Hebrew storytelling styles, but also just in general how humans work. Like, that is a much better explanation than your standard kind of historical exchange.
They might not have even realized they were doing it. I mean, think about how many times you hear about like a comedian getting in trouble with another comedian for like stealing jokes, and it's a matter of they didn't even realize they were doing it. They thought that they came up with that, like, or even like just weird synchronicity stuff, like without going into details. Somebody I know used to make like videos in like high school and college and stuff like that for funsies and for class projects and stuff. And like, there was a particular plot element like that came up exactly years later in a fiction story that hadn't been written yet, that we could not possibly have seen, and it was the exact same thing, and it was a weirdly specific thing. It was the vortex manipulator from Doctor Who. It wasn't had been called that in these videos, but it was the same exact dang thing.
Right. Now, we could take this in a different, more meta direction too. And this is something I have kind of always felt might be true in a God-authored reality, is that I often wonder if there isn't a narrative quality to reality.
I've had to get myself away from that idea. It's too easy to get to thinking that you're the protagonist.
You're the main character.
And we're not.
Yeah, that is definitely
just here by, well, not necessarily by accident, but we're all just here.
Yeah, and I think that if you balance with the assumption that you're not necessarily the character, but a character, that there does tend to be a bit of a narrative aspect. I don't say like the entire thing's a handcrafted narrative specifically for you. That's getting too into evangelical theology for me. But there does appear to be a narrative quality to the way reality happens. And now I will preface that by saying whether that is a God-authored attribute or whether that is an artifact of the fact that our reality is based on interaction with other humans and we're all driven by narrative impulses, who knows? But you look at the biblical story here, to bring it back to that, are we seeing these echoes because people were swapping stories, or are we seeing because they're independent stories that share narrative attributes because that's just how reality works? No idea. But it's fun to think about.
Fun thought experiments brought to you by the church ?
Hey, if nothing else, we're here to make you think. So what else do we got in here that looks interesting?
All right, let me look at the scripture. Like we're actually
we obviously got blueprints here.
I'm going to destroy them along with the earth. Why? No. Like, why? Like, the earth didn't do anything wrong. Okay, it says something about, the whole earth is corrupted because people are terrible, and like, and again, as I mentioned last time, this all reeks pretty hard of are we trying to keep the language PG here?
Ish.
Okay, I messed up. Like,
that's fine.
I screwed this up. Like,
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We all slip up.
No, I'm saying that this whole story reeks of I screwed up.
Yeah.
Flushing it. Let's wipe the board clean. Start again.
Yeah. No, like the ancient interpretation approach to this has been that creation as originally designed was kind of a lion lays down with the lamb sort of thing, and that the sin of humans spread beyond humans into the creation that they were meant to have stewardship over. So when we get to the point of God saying, okay, rocks fall, everybody dies, we're dealing with God saying, yeah, it's infected everything. Kind of like evangelical theology in the modern church. That's a discussion for later. But yeah, so God is making the case here, according to traditional interpretation, that, yeah, you humans are terrible and you've poisoned everything else. Which, of course, goes into, I know I keep bringing it up, but I do actually find it a very interesting take on it. The Russell Crowe Noah movie, which portrays...
Make me watch this.
I think you should. Like, it is not always a traditional approach to things, but it does have a very unique approach that I think is worth considering. One of the things they do is they portray everybody but Noah as hardcore kind of like industrial capitalists, like big on metalworking, build on building, and big on poisoning the environment, like, you know, an entire race of Sarumen, something like that.
Saruman?
So the idea being that humankind is poisoning the land and poisoning the air and forcing animals out of their habitats to behave in ways that they don't normally do. And God's like, I got to kill it all and start over. Which, honestly, if nothing else from this section of Genesis, that interpretive ideology should really resonate with us today.
Something else that strikes me is like, okay, well, what's the point? If he's going to kill it all and start over, what was the point of the ark? Like, you're going to kill all the animals, but make sure that the animals make it.
Yeah, again, there are
plot holes this big.
Well, it's not meant to be Lord of the Rings. Thank you very much. But no, we get here, and I'm trying to find exactly where it was, but there was an interpretive argument here that presents the idea that what is going on with the animals, first off, in this verse here, no, it's in the next chapter, but Noah's instructed to take animals specifically in a pattern that is related to how animal sacrifices work. So that the original bequest was, yeah, take enough animals with you so you've got something to sacrifice on the other side, because that's how you people do worship.
But the text says like 2 of everything.
Yeah, and again,
like there were specifically animals that were considered unclean to sacrifice, right?
Yeah, and this is
and
where
they were still in the ark, right?
This is where it gets weird between chapters 6, 7, and 8. Is that we have differing commands given by God to Noah, but when we kick it back to the Hebrew, God giving commands is the God who is giving commands is named differently in different instances. Like in one case, it's Elohim, which is the generic term for God. In other cases, it's the Tetragrammaton, YHVH, the name of God. Which those are often used by different authors. So we have indication here that we have multiple stories of the flood that are coming together, which is why we're probably getting contradictory things.
I hate to grind this to a halt, but Tetragrammaton, you're going to need to run that one by me.
Tetragrammaton is a term that refers to the original name of God. Now, are you familiar with that at all?
No.
Yeah,
God. I had it drilled into me that God was the name of God. I am that I am, and that's like.
Yeah, your church missed a step on that. God has an actual name. Did you know that?
No.
God's name. Well, God has a name. We don't actually know what it is. It
feels forbidden, like the name of the doctor or something.
It actually is. It kind of is. The name was given as YHVH, which you may notice has no vowels in it. Now, the reason being is that ancient Hebrew didn't have any vowels, at least not in written form. Like the vowels were, if you read ancient Hebrew, which I'm sure you totally do, vowels are indicated with kind of dots and dashes above or below the letter, kind of the same way that Tolkien does in his Elvish script.
Yeah.
It's where he got the idea. But the reason for that is because the vowels don't actually exist in the written text. So the name of God was given as YHVH, but nobody writ the vowels down anywhere. And that was a secret knowledge that was passed like throughout the priestly family for a while until it got forgotten. So it is presumably some combination of YHVH with the correct vowels, but we don't know what that combination might be.
Is that where Yahweh is thought to come from?
Yahweh is the general interpretation of what that might sound like. Now, one last little piece of interest. When you take Yahweh, that's what happens when you add letters using the vowels as they are in Hebrew. When you add letters using the vowels as they present in Latin, you get JHVH instead
Jehovah.
of YHVH, which is where we get Jehovah. So Jehovah is Yahweh in Latin. But anyway, we've gone a little bit off track with our discussion of the fact
that kind of stuff fascinates me. Yeah, let's get back to the topic at hand.
No, it's like these sorts of divergences. I hope people find them interesting as well. But yes, God does have a name, but in this passage here, we're getting multiple names of God. So we talked back in the beginning, literally in the beginning, about the term Elohim, literally meaning God in a weirdly dual sense. That's used here. We get YHVH as well. And so when we get to English translations, it's all like God or the Lord said this, and we associate them because talking about the same dude. That's how our language works. Not necessarily so in the ancient Hebrew.
Are we talking like different aspects?
Could be different aspects. It's also entirely possible, and this is really stretching it, that like in this case, Elohim might refer to a lesser God. That's been one more out there interpretive approach here too. Generally speaking, the truth of it is that there are multiple stories being combined here with different authors, because the name that you choose for God is kind of like an author's signature. Like that tells you that like one author only sticks to that one name usage in a lot of these old Hebrew texts. So the fact that we're getting a back and forth switcheroo as to name usage tells us we've got stories by multiple authors that are being fed together. What that means, I don't know, but that's why we have contradictions.
All right. So do we have anything else? I know we're going long at this point.
We're definitely going long, but that is cool because we got stuff to talk about. But I think we've covered the most of it for this chapter, don't you?
Yeah, I'm just taking a quick run around.
Yeah. After this, it just take two of everything.
The measurement stuff is all very academic.
Yeah, all academic unless you're trying to, for some reason, build a tourist attraction in the South. But hey, nobody in their right mind would do that. In any case, let's go ahead and stop here for this this episode. We're gonna kick it to chapter 7 next week for some fun, some fanciness, and some flood. So we're gonna get to the kill all humans portion of our Bible study, which will be fun. And in the meantime,
like, share, and subscribe.
Yeah, that thing which we always want to encourage the people to be doing.
Comment and tell us if you have any questions about that we didn't cover, or any comments that you thought of while you were watching the video.
Oh yeah, throw it on.
Tag a friend.
Tag a friend. Share. God, sharing this thing on Facebook is what gets us views, man. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
The more this sucker gets passed around, the better things are for us. Like, share, subscribe. Literally share. That's really helpful.
Basically, if you think this is worth viewing, try and get more eyeballs on it because it'll help us keep doing it.
Exactly. And if you have questions, like the lady said, comment down below, or hop onto the Discord server, because we're doing a lot of talking about a lot of this stuff a lot of the time. So come join us there. Links for everything are down below in the description. So you can get a hold of us. You can do whatever. But most importantly, hope you enjoyed our Bible study, and we will see you all for some very wet and wild adventures next week. Bye, everybody.
Later.